Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie. I'm a book-loving, notebook-hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. And this is the Get Literate podcast. On this podcast, we explore the power of leading literate lives. We talk all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to make our lives better. And no matter what better means to you, the pages inside books and notebooks can help us get there. So, each week, we'll mix together books, notebooks, mindful practices, and creativity to cultivate a life we love. Now, grab a notebook and your TBR list, and let's get literate. Hey everyone, Stephanie here, and welcome back to the Get Literate podcast. Over the past few weeks, I've dedicated a couple of episodes to the topic of writing and journaling and notebooking. We've talked about our notebook love languages. We've talked about journaling for mental health. We've talked about being creative in our journaling and all things trying to build a robust writing habit. Today, we are going to continue our writing focus with a special guest. I've got Wendy Reed here, someone who has done something many of us likely hope to do someday, which is publish a book, have our story out there. She has independently published picture books for kids, for adults, inspirational books, journals, and more. So Wendy's here today to tell us all the things: who she is, the literacy work she does, her double digits number of self-published books and counting, I'm sure, and what she's excited for, what sparks her, and what I can't wait to hear is how she actually does it. So Wendy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so happy to be here.
I am too. I'm really excited for today's conversation. You know, and I was thinking back how we first got connected. I honestly can't remember when or where or how, but I know it was around our work as literacy educators. I know it was around our love of books, something in there. And I know it was probably on Twitter because I remember it being specifically on social media. And well, I remember some of your literacy posts. The posts that I really remember, the ones that made me stop the scroll, were the ones where you were talking about your self-published books, right? Those are the ones that really got my attention. And by got my attention, I mean, made me jealous, right? In a good way, because I thought it was amazing that you were doing this yourself. I was connected to you right when the first books came out and then the later books. And I think I reached out to you a little while back, actually, just saying, this is awesome. Like, this is so awesome to see someone do. And we had a quick little conversation, went on our way, and then up comes your feed again with more books and new books. And I thought, okay, I need to talk to her. I need to get closer to that bookish energy that you have. I need to get closer to that just do it kind of spirit of, heck, let's just keep going publishing these books. I admire it so much. And so I am really excited to hear about the process, learn about it, and then share it with everybody today. So here we are. I'm going to finally stop talking and turn the mic over to you. Why don't you tell listeners who you are, the work you do, especially, you know, your books, and what brought you here today?
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. You're so kind. I'm glad that you've been inspired. You know, like you and like so many people, I had so many ideas for books and wasn't sure where to go to get them published. And so being able to figure out where to go and how to get that done has made such a difference. And you're right, I haven't been able to stop because it does bring me so much joy to publish these books.
Yeah.
To give you a little bit of my backstory, I'm actually a literacy collaborative trainer with The Ohio State University. And so within that capacity, I train literacy coaches and lead educators in professional learning experiences. I have opportunities to visit lots of schools around the country, both within that capacity and as a consultant with schools, leading literacy teams and so on, all around the area of teaching and learning with literacy. And so, I've always been passionate about literacy in particular. I was a classroom teacher for 15 years prior to coming to Ohio State, and I've been there for the past 12 years. Um, and throughout all of that time, I had had opportunities to write blogs and was working on my PhD and did some academic, writing and publishing as well, but still had these stories,
Mm.
children's books in particular, that I was just holding on to and wasn't quite sure where to go. Um, I'll tell you a couple of the big challenges for me were, where to publish and how to get my books illustrated because I'm not an artist. And the idea of having someone else do the artwork made me a little nervous. I really wanted, my illustrations to represent my stories. So a couple of years ago, during COVID, my husband and I were both working remotely. And even though I was still working for Ohio State, we made the decision to move to South Carolina. And we're able to work remotely most of the time, but also do some traveling to continue to go back to Ohio State or to serve schools around the country. But once we got here to South Carolina, I fell in love with the wildlife, the coastal wildlife. Um, I never thought that I would be a person who would love alligators, but I do. I find them to be fascinating. And so all of the coastal wildlife inspired me to take up photography. And I started writing poetry basically about all of the coastal wildlife creatures that I was seeing. And that led to me writing the book, Gators, Waders, and Wings, which is the first book that I published for children. I included my own photography. And so that solved the problem of needing an illustrator. And basically that book it's full of pictures and sort of tributes to these coastal wildlife creatures like ibises and herons and spoonbills and egrets and alligators and pelicans and so on. Um, and so I started investigating, possibilities for how I might publish. And it was actually a friend of my mom's who was having a conversation with, and she said that she publishes books. She's an indie publisher or an indie writer, and used Lulu, Lulu. So I knew again, about KDP through Amazon and about Ingram. But when she talked about using Lulu, that sounded like something doable. So I pursued that. Um, and I was able to publish that first book. And that was just less than a year ago. The Gators,
No,
Waders, and Wings was published. Yeah.
really?
Yes.
Okay, okay, Wendy. So how many books since book number one? What number book are you on right now?
I think I have 18 books now
That's what I
published.
counted too. Okay.
Yes.
18 books self-published in about a year.
Yeah, in less than a year. I think it was last May when my first one was published, and I haven't been able to stop. Um, and I'll tell you, a personal story too. I had been working on my PhD in education for several years. I had, completed all of the coursework and had conducted dissertation research and had been spending probably a year and a half writing the dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I learned so much and um, it definitely fed into the work that I do with teachers, that dissertation writing was starting to feel less and less like my own. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't bringing me the joy that I was looking for with my writing. And I made that really tough decision to stop, to set that aside and stop and be okay with that. I decided I didn't really need the PhD. I had, the experience and, um, all of the wonderful opportunities and experiences that I had gained through that work. I still carried with me. But when I set that aside and started working on my own writing, that's when I really found that joy again in writing.
Yes.
Um,
Oh,
so that's, yeah.
I can totally relate, right, to someone who has been through that, I will say, horrific dissertation writing hoop that you have to jump through. It does, or it has the potential to kind of suck out that joy that you went into it with. So I can understand your process there, but I absolutely love that you just decided to let it go, right? You didn't need it. It's three little letters,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that those three little letters don't have to stop us from doing what actually makes us happy. And in letting that go, you found this.
That's
That's
right.
what I love, because I personally, and I know a lot of people do, I have a hard time letting all the things go, right? You feel like if you drop one of the balls, then everything is just going to fall apart. And time again, I always have all of these real life examples. And now you being another one, that when you intentionally decide to let something go, then beautiful things end up happening in that space. I
Mhm.
love that this came out of that for you. How
Mm, yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow.
It was a hard decision, and it was kind of a selfish decision, you know, it was right for me. And yeah, I'm kind of like you in that way as well. There was that reluctance because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I didn't want to drop that important part of my identity that I had been working toward for so long. But it really did make space for me to be able to move forward with the writing that brings me such joy. So it was right. It was a good decision for me.
Well, yeah, 18 examples later of why that was such a good example. So tell us more about the books, because I know you have a wide range of books. There are
Yes.
picture books for kids. There are picture books for adults. I actually featured your winter collection on my Get Literate bibliotherapy book calendar. We were exploring wintering, and so that was one of my recommendations. And you've got journals. So kind of talk about the evolution from that one book that I love, that was sparked by yet another passion, right? A passion of where you
Yeah.
were, what you were learning about, your own photography. How did you make the jump to the other kinds of books that you have as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for featuring my Hello Winter book.
Oh, happy
Um,
to.
yeah, so there were other stories that I had written over the years that I sort of pulled back out and started working on.
Mhm.
And so the second book that I published was actually The Adventures of a Big Blue Boat, which is a story that I wrote many years ago. Um, Interestingly, my own sons, who are now in their early 30s, were about 5 and 6 at the time, and I was in college to become a teacher. And the professor had charged us with an assignment to write a children's picture book. And so this is the story that I wrote. And when I revisited it, I did a little revising and I figured out how to do my own digital illustrations
Oh,
and was able to actually put together this beautiful hardcover book. And that was the second one. Yeah.
wow. So you are really, as you're doing this process, you're growing, right? You have
Yeah.
now figured out how to be a digital illustrator for these books, where, someone else might just have gotten overwhelmed at oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't find someone. And you are just pushing those boundaries, it sounds like, with each book that you have. I did not realize that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll tell you, the illustrating part brings me just as much joy and pleasure as the writing. Um, I use Canva and it allows me to build lots of illustrations in lots of different ways. And so the decisions that writers make, the choices that we make about um, structuring even the illustrations on a page, structuring formatting the text and choosing fonts and
Mhm.
all of those kinds of things, right? The way that illustrations add to the story are so important, and so that's been really fun to learn how to do that as well. And so that enabled me to be able to move forward with self-publishing. Um, and so I have a range of texts, really. I don't necessarily stay within one genre. I have, Love Comes on Little Cat Feet was the next one that I wrote. And that was a story that I had also started several years ago. It's the story of a boy named Charlie who lives in foster care and really navigates the experiences that he has with poetry. And so he reads and revises Carl Sandburg's poem, Fog Comes on Little Cat Feet, as he's thinking about his own experiences. And he's always looking for love and ultimately finds love in kind of a surprising place. And so that was a book that several years ago I started writing as a picture book, and then it sort of moved into young adult novel. And then I went back to the picture book idea with that. So after that, I wrote The Rough Labs, and that's a book about Labrador retrievers who have an adventure. Um, they live in the country and they love playing together, but they get themselves into some mischief and they need to solve a problem. So with that book, interestingly, we write what we know, right? The three labs that are featured in that book belonged to my family. And so my dad makes an appearance, and I was able to include his picture, right, in my illustrations.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. And so after that, I decided I needed to write a nonfiction book about Labrador retrievers as well, just to give information about labs.
Mhm.
Um, I also have Creative Child, which is a book for very young children. It's just this rhyming book that is very empowering for children in terms of the choices that they might make in a day, in any given day. And with that book, I really tried to be intentional about being very inclusive with my illustrations. So I feature lots and lots of children playing all sorts of different things and making lots of different choices. But I was very intentional about including children of multiple races and abilities. My son, who is serving in special forces and graduated from West Point, actually said to me, Mom, you should write a book for children whose parents are deploying. I think there's a real need for that. And so, I started drafting and relying on him to give me some feedback about what was accurate and what kids might need to know. And so that book it's kind of a narrative nonfiction text that just poses uh, questions and answers and makes space for parents to have conversation with their kids as they're deploying.
That's very powerful. I mean, that's really why we read, right? We read to learn, to grow, to escape, to connect. And books are tools, right? Not tools to always be used for a particular reason. That tool can just be sheer enjoyment. But in this case, to use a book as a way to open a conversation with a child or to better connect with a child, to better help them understand when something is going on, that's such a powerful gift to give.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely see a need for that as well. And I also have another children's book that I included my photography in. And this was one that I wanted to speak to children too. And it's called Enough, Just as You Are. And it includes that empowering message of being enough, something that so many of us grapple with. And in this particular story, I actually um, have these wildlife animals who grapple with their own abilities, their own talents, the way that they look, the way that they take care of their young, and so on. And so they're wondering, is the great blue heron wonders if he will be able to be fast enough to get away from the alligator when the alligator lunges. And then I reassure that great blue heron, don't be troubled, great blue heron. Your intuition is enough to keep you safe. And so throughout that story, I continue to address each of these animals, but then ultimately address children as well.
Right.
To send them that empowering message.
Tell us more about your Hello series.
Oh, yeah. So I do have a series for adults that actually are part of a seasonal collection. Hello Autumn was the first one. And I co-wrote that with my best friend, Diane Keys. She sends me, recipes and pictures that she might like to include in the book, and I put it all together. But it's really a collection of beautiful photographs and home decorating ideas and poems and recipes, to-do lists, bucket lists for the season. So all things autumn are in the Hello Autumn book. And then we have the Hello Winter, Hello Spring just came out, and we're working on Hello Summer. So we'll have all of those soon.
Wow.
Those were a lot of fun to write. It felt a little bit like scrapbooking, as I was working to put those together, because just making choices about all the different, beautiful images to include and the little tidbits to include, rather than being written as a narrative or even nonfiction. It just is this collection of all things around the season.
I think that's why I love it so much. That's why I was recommending the winter one, especially in our theme of wintering, because like you said, a narrative book kind of talking about a particular topic or even a particular season, that's wonderful. But when you see someone who has written a book that you can clearly see has lived the joy in that season and is just sharing it with readers, that comes across, especially because it's beautiful, right? The way that it is all laid out. So I love books like that when I can see that the author hasn't just written the book, but lived the book and then shared it with me. And so I think that's a really powerful thing about a collection like that. And now knowing that you've got to share that with a friend, right,
Yes.
is even better. That's a beautiful partnership.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. There is so much to appreciate about each season. And so this did give us the opportunity to start to just generate all of the things that we might appreciate, all of the beautiful flowers, for instance, we've included in Hello Spring, and a lot of my own photography is included as well. So that's been a lot of fun.
Wow. So this truly is a life passion project for you.
It is. It is. I find myself, constantly looking for and thinking about ideas. I'm a strong believer in the power of mentor text, and I teach teachers to use mentor texts as they're modeling writing mini lessons, for instance. And as a reader, I'm always noticing powerful mentor texts around me. But I also believe that there are all kinds of things around us that can serve as mentor texts other than just books, or just the written text, right? And so I'm constantly noticing ideas and jotting those down and thinking about them. Just had a conversation recently with my mom. We were talking about equity. She's also an educator. And we were talking about equity. And through that conversation, she actually said, equity really is love. And so we continued to talk about that. And she actually said, you should write a book about that. And that evening, I started that book, and it just, flowed. And I was able to finish that and illustrate it. And it just recently was published. So Love is Equity, or I'm sorry, Equity is Love. I think they're kind of interchangeable. But with all of the talk, in our world right now about equity and the need to help not only children but teachers understand the wide definition that that involves, I think is so important. And so this simple picture book is able to convey that.
Would you say, like listening to you talk, I can see that a lot of your book ideas, if not all of them, have come from your own life, right? And first falling in love with coastal life and then moving into photography. And then all of these ideas for picture books seem to be sparked by something. You
Mm-hmm.
find that in writing the books and noticing and observing and living like a writer, has that changed or added to or influenced your life as well? I mean, one of the things I always talk about is how our reading and writing lives can influence our actual lives. And so I'm curious to know what you think. Do you see any differences in yourself or the way that you approach the world or live in it or notice it or document it since you've started writing these books?
Oh, that's a great question. I do think that all of my books have been inspired by something personal, right? Something in my life that has happened or that I enjoy or that I'm seeing around me. In terms of my writing inspiring my life, there have definitely been changes in terms of me being able to share my books, in particular with teachers and with classrooms as well. Um, I think one of the big things that has come out of it also is just being able to help teachers, and even non-teachers understand that they have stories that are powerful and they need to just write them. And having a resource like Lulu or Ingram or KDP, right, is a way that you can do that. um, I'm collaborating with another gal right now who has written a story about a little girl who was Indonesian and Muslim and has immigrated to the US and is seeking to maintain all of those identities. And it's her story, but I'm illustrating it for her because she didn't feel like that was a part that she could do.
Mhm.
So, as human beings, we all have these stories, whether they're fiction or nonfiction. And so finding these tools to be able to publish them and get those stories into the world are so important.
Yeah. What would you say to someone, maybe myself, who loves this idea, who thinks, yes, I would definitely love to do that, but I just don't know where I'd begin, or they're too overwhelmed. Do you have any nuggets of advice that you would share to someone who wants to find that outlet for their voice?
Yeah. I think it's important to embrace the idea that it's a messy process and that's okay. We
Mhm.
want to live in that messiness until it's actually published. That's all good, right? That's part of our work. That's part of our process. So, lots of times I've actually talked with people who say, I might have a story that I can talk about, but I haven't yet written it down. So, of course, the first step is just writing it down
Yeah.
and then, sleeping on it and playing with the language and revising and knowing that revision is your friend. Um, so, getting it written down and then a lot of times people get that much done but aren't sure where to go next.
Right.
And so that's where I would recommend, go to the lulu.com site or check out Ingram Spark or Amazon KDP to see what's required. It's really not that hard to publish through those platforms. And then in terms of the illustrations, there are lots of different options if you are an illustrator or have an illustrator. But even if you're not comfortable creating your own digital illustrations, you could work with someone who does do that kind of work.
Right.
And you can certainly find those people through other platforms like Fiverr, for instance. I actually do offer my illustrating services through Fiverr, and you just have to make it happen and not let fear hold you back, because once you start, it's amazing. And I'll tell you, when you are an indie publisher also, I work really hard to make sure that what I'm publishing is my best work. But unlike writing a dissertation, I don't necessarily have a critical voice who's saying, oh, why don't you do it this way instead?
Right.
And so you get to write what you want. And that is such joy.
Yeah. And you can hear it. You can hear it in your voice how joyful that is. But I love your point that you said right in the beginning. If someone wants to do this but is overwhelmed, what do they do? What are the steps? You can't do any of it until you just write that story down. So just take that leap and put pen to paper and just see, and then figure out each little messy step that
That's
might
right.
come next, and know it's messy and know
Yes,
it's scary and do it anyway.
absolutely. Embrace that messiness,
I love that.
and find someone who will listen to your writing and offer not only some constructive feedback, but some positive feedback. Because as we know, writers are fragile. And so that idea of putting your writing out there can feel really risky and really scary. We want that feedback from others. But we also want to make sure that we're finding others who appreciate our work too.
Right.
Um, I'm part of a couple of writing communities as well, local authors who come together and we share our work with one another, and that's been really informative and valuable as a writer.
Yeah, you need that support to keep going.
You do, you
So,
do.
in thinking of keeping going, do you have more books on the horizon?
Absolutely. I don't think this is something that I will ever stop doing now. It's such a joy. Um, like I said, I'm working on Hello Summer with
Mhm.
my friend Diane. I'm also working on the text, actually illustrating the text for Tanti, who is doing the writing. Um, I just actually, I think maybe just within the last couple of days, published another book, finished another book, and got it published called From Axolotl to Zebu, of These Animals Who Knew? And it's an ABC book with lots of different animals from around the world. And it's written kind of in a riddle like format. So there's a page that tells all about an animal and asks questions about that animal along with the letter of the alphabet. So starting with A, and then you turn the page and there's the axolotl revealed. So just finished that one. I have ideas for some other books, and the one thing that I haven't done yet is written a novel. And so I'm thinking about some possibilities. I think it might be fun to write romance and to give it a try. Um, I just have to remember that my my sons will will be reading it. So yeah, there's that fine line of making it really good, really interesting, but
Right,
um, being able to look my sons in the eye.
right. So when you first started this bookish journey, so about a year ago, or at least I know you thought about it before then, but from your first picture book to now kind of saying, I think I actually could write a novel, right? I could go into a romance novel. Did you see that? Did you vision that last year when you got started? Or are you just realizing that so much more is possible now that you made that first move?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's the latter. I
Yeah.
always envisioned children's picture books. And over the years, I've also envisioned writing pedagogical books for teachers. And, I do so much work with teachers around those areas of literacy, teaching, and learning. Um, I still work for OSU, and so I'm not sure about there being a conflict of interest in terms of writing books like that at this point. So I'm holding off that kind of writing right now. But in terms of writing a novel, a romance novel? No, I had not envisioned that at all.
Yeah.
And I think that because of the networking that I do with local authors who have written romance novels, and hearing them talk about, their process, and hearing them talk about the ideas that they're writing, it just makes it feel more doable to me,
Mhm.
and also makes it sound like something that I would enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that through the process, I just continue to grow. Um, I don't want to just write one kind of book or one genre. I want to try it all. It's a lot of fun to try it all.
Oh, it is so inspiring. Really, just the whole idea of you just leaning into what is joyful and
Mm,
just putting it out there, messy middle, right? Doing it
yeah.
anyway, but seeing all of those possibilities that have opened from that one first book, right? To possibilities for all of the other books that have come, but the collaborations, the community, and even more, just this idea that you've got much more in you that maybe
Yeah.
you wouldn't have thought of before. That means everything. That is so inspiring. I feel like we went on a journey from talking about books to some life coaching
Mm.
this episode.
Absolutely. And you're making me think about a piece of advice too. When we write our books and we get those stories out there and we have a platform to do so, we can continue to contribute to this world. And so I would recommend people start this as soon as possible, because think about how you can continue that journey of contributing across your life. Our ideas are always changing, and who we are, right? We're always growing, we're always in process. And so to be able to continue to write and get those ideas out there, in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, and so on. I was 54 when I published my first book last year.
Love it.
So
I love
yeah,
it. You're right. That is inspiring advice, right? What might we miss out on if we just don't put pen to paper today and get a little seed of an idea out there and just see where it goes?
that's right.
Oh, so
That's
see, okay, listeners, that is our task now today is to get out that notebook and put something down that's been on your mind or your heart and just follow the joy. See where it goes. What a rule for living that I feel like you just embody throughout
mm,
this whole conversation. We are on a podcast, so they can't see us talking on Zoom, but the Zoom screen is just full of excitement and joy, and it's wonderful. I knew I wanted to get closer to it, and this was why. This was why.
oh, thank you so much.
So where can listeners find you so that they can see your books, purchase your books, maybe perhaps connect with you? I know you've offered some coaching in the past to help people through this process. Where can they
Mhm.
find you?
Yeah. So my website actually is reflectivepress.com, reflective with an IVE. Um, and so they can, see all of my books and learn some things about me on that website. They can purchase books. I also have created some fun merchandise that kind of goes along with books, like T-shirts with spoonbills and herons and so on, and coffee mugs with those images, my photography on them. So those are there on the website as well. And then on Twitter, you can find me at Wendy the Teacher. And once you get to those places, you can also find my Facebook author page. I have an Instagram author page that I've just recently started. So I would love to connect with people. My email is there as well. So, people are welcome to email me. I do occasionally offer a class on how to um, self-publish your own book. If you have a draft and you've been, thinking about some ideas but are not sure where to go, um, I have a 5-week course that will teach you some craft mini lessons so that you can actually do some revision with your text, but then also learn how to publish it and how to digitally illustrate it. So, it's a real need, I think, for indie writers to be able to figure that out
Mhm.
and get those ideas published.
Yeah. Well, you may have a student pretty soon because you've got me all fired up of what I'm going to write this afternoon after we log off of this call.
Oh, that's fabulous, Stephanie. Thank you. I would
Oh,
love to
thank
be able
you.
to help you with that.
Oh, well, I have so enjoyed this conversation. I just feel lit up on the inside for all things books and bookish. And not just that, but just the idea of following those little seeds that we have in our minds can just change everything, right? For your whole life, your whole view of yourself, of what's possible. Such an inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you for all that you do.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing lives, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking challenges, live events, giveaways, and much more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. But one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks so much for listening.